Observe and interact. So beauty is in the eye of the beholder. This one's very important. You can think of sit spots or visioning on your land where you just sit and you just observe everything in your landscape. Maybe you'll notice something that you otherwise wouldn't notice. And the more observation you do, the better your ultimate design will be. The more information you'll gather about this particular place, because every site's different. And there are intricacies that should be found out, that need to be found so we can incorporate them into our thinking when we're designing a landscape. And so we observe, then we interact by making a change, and then we observe that. And you can also think about, with like Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, where simply observing something changes its behavior. You know, we've proven that scientifically. That's where, with quantum theory and quantum physics, you know, that's where you end up talking, you go down that rabbit hole. But this applies to there as well. The second principle, catch and store energy. So the saying, and each one of these is associated, they have a saying or a keening associated with it. And the symbol at the top left is a symbol it uses, that's a sun in a bottle. So when we think about catching and storing energy, you can see this top right picture here, that's called a thermal mass heater. And so that whole thing that woman's sitting on is heated. There's a fire to the inside to the left of her, and it burns so efficiently that it doesn't even have to exhaust to outside. Steam, all the gases are burned completely. It's a low-tech thing, and that's one way of catching and storing energy for the winter when it's cold. Another way, you can think appropriate technology with, say, solar panels here, or you can talk about solar hot water heaters. You know, at the bottom there's a store of wood. Over here we're collecting rain in a rain barrel. You know, so you're catching and storing energy there because now you can irrigate without needing pumps or anything, especially if you elevate that rain barrel. Just the pressure of the water can irrigate pretty good distances. But the most important way to think about catching and storing energy is with the green world, and that's why this plant's there. And this is very permaculture here. This is when people think permaculture, the idea of a food forest will come in shortly, because basically this is what we design mostly, is food forests. And the idea here is there's seven different layers where you can catch the sunlight with different plants that fit these different niches. So you have your full canopy, your large trees or your large fruit and nut trees. And then the next layer you have your low tree layer, so dwarf fruit trees. And then next you have your shrub layer, so currants, berries, possibly hazelnuts. And then next you have your herbaceous layer, right? And then which is going to be non-woody plants. Then you have your rhizosphere, your roots, so carrots, potatoes. Then you have your soil surface or ground covers, so something like clover. And then you have your vertical layers or climbers, vines. So you can think grapes, they do that. I mean, there's a number of them. So what you do is you catch every single one of these layers is a different opportunity for a different organism that specializes in a certain layer of this with respect to catching light. So it becomes very dense. This is a mature food forest, Orcas Island, Washington, the Bullocks brothers. And they're talked about in the book, that one of the books I would recommend the most is called Gaia's Garden, but written by Toby Hemingway. And if you've read nothing else about permaculture, this should be the book that you read. It's an amazing book, and it deals mostly with plants. So if this being a gardening club, it's the most appropriate, I would say. But this is kind of what it looks like. You know, a lot of people think it looks kind of wild, and I guess it does. But it's all food. It's food. It's fiber. It's fuel. It's medicine. It's useful to man, and that's what's important. And also to insects, to wildlife. It's not just meant to man. This is another idea of a food forest. I don't know where this is. I just plucked it off the internet. It looks like it's next to a church. This is kind of an urban setting. Kind of another way you can look at how this can manifest, because it really is limited to your imagination. So the next principle is obtain a yield. This one's pretty much the simplest in my opinion, but at the same time, this drives human affairs. I mean, we want to be rewarded. We want to have something for our efforts. you don't want to plant a garden, and I mean, of course, you can talk about aesthetics and that being, you know, the value, something you get out of gardening. But I mean, you got to eat, you know. You can't work on an empty stomach. So, but obtain a yield. That's what you want your system to do. And so it seems simple, but if you look at the top left, there's a bite out of that. I guess that's a radish. And that's just kind of to remind us that we're not the only ones trying to obtain a yield. And sometimes that's just what you got to work with. Cut the bad out and eat away anyway. Okay, so this is the fourth principle. Apply self-regulation and accept feedback. This is a pretty complicated principle. But we can talk about positive. The best way to look at this principle is, and this is why David Holmgren chose to use the earth as a symbol for this. Like the Gaia hypothesis, or the idea that the earth is a self-regulating organism that takes care of itself via positive and negative feedback loops. And there's a lot of wisdom there, and so a lot of what we do in permaculture is we study nature to mimic it, which we talk about in another principle. And so, but this can also apply to us as individuals and humility, you know, and just accepting feedback from others, staying humble. It's important to do that. And so the saying here, the sins of the fathers are visited on the children unto the 7th generation. That's what permaculture is really about. We want to stop the sins of the fathers, particularly with respect to how we're running our global civilization and producing the foods and the medicines and the fibers and everything that we need to keep this whole experiment going. So much for that. The 5th principle, use and value renewable energy and resources. And so we have the picture here of this cow, ruminant. Originally I had grasses for ruminants written on that, but I took it off. So this animal, so we have a lot going on. One, grass is probably the most efficient plant as far as capturing sunlight is concerned. We can't eat grass. Ruminants can eat grass. They can also increase the fertility of the soil while they do it via their manure. And then we take the milk from the cow and we make yogurt, cheese, we eat the cow itself. And that's just showing this is like natural capital here. But the important thing is we want to value that cow. We want to value the grass, and we want to value the processes that keep us alive. Someone's phone's ringing.
Sorry about that.
Okay, so it's important to use renewable energy, and because of the whole fossil fuel issue, and because of, you know, even nuclear power requires fossil energy to run. I mean, uranium, plutonium doesn't get itself out of the ground, and you can't do that with nuclear energy. So the bug here, that showed up in our garden this last Halloween, actually, and we've been there since 2012, and I stopped using pesticides. That's a wheel bug, or an assassin bug.
It's like it's prehistoric.
Yeah, and he's got that little, you see that right there? That's what he sticks you with. It's said that you're in pain for months if this guy gets you. But a wheel bug or an assassin bug, they eat stink bugs, this is a top bug predator. He's on the top of the chain. And when he shows up, it's indicative of a pesticide-free environment. Otherwise, he won't show up, according to the entomologist that I read to read about this particular bug, what he said. So, you know, I'm not an entomologist, but it was interesting to see it show up in our landscape, and it's good because we also had Japanese beetles show up this year, and a lot. And then we had June bugs show up, and he eats those too. So Lynn mentioned to me integrated pest management integrated pest management has been covered, and that y'all were aware of the idea of using, rather than using pesticides, to just allow basically you foster a healthy ecology in your garden, and the good guys show up, and then a balance starts to happen. Hopefully. That's what we hope for. But there are a lot of reasons to not use pesticides, fungicides, herbicides, and yes, sir.
What's the insect again?
A wheel bug.
Wheel?
Yeah, or assassin bug. It's called a wheel because
Wheel?
W-H-E-E-L, because of this back on them. They say it kind of looks like a wheel
Yes.
or half a wheel. And also another one's good, praying mantises. I had them show up. Well, I brought them actually. I brought praying mantises which I'll talk about later, at Haiku Bamboo Nursery where I interned with Keiji Yoshima. While we were pruning some arrow bamboo, I found 7 praying mantis sacks and brought them all home and stuck them all in my garden.
They're amazing, when they hatch, they're like fully made, and they're like all these little.
Yeah, they're just little miniature praying mantises, and it's an interesting story about one of those. I brought home 7, and I only found 6. One of them got left in my truck.
Oh.
I do conventional landscaping predominantly. I mow your lawn, I'll cut your shrubbery, I'll do everything that's conventional. The permaculture and bamboo are things I'm moving towards, but to pay the bills and make things work, I'm a conventional landscaper. So anyway, I'm at work, and all of a sudden, I get in my truck to go leave to work, and I look over, and there are hundreds of these little things all in my truck. And I didn't know what they were at first, because, I've never seen anything like that. And so for about a week, I took pride in riding around Spartanburg with my window down. I parked my window down, because I'm distributing praying mantises everywhere I go. And I value, renewable energy and resources. That bug is a resource. That cow is a resource. And that wheel bug does this job for free. And we can think about environmental services that nature does for us for free, like produce oxygen, give us drinking water, give us a human supporting biome. Nature does all that for free. So the 6th principle, produce no waste. A stitch in time saves 9, waste not, want not. And then you can see the little eye there, the whole idea to reuse, recycle, repurpose. That's very much in line with our thinking because we generate too much waste. Something like 70% of a landfill is diapers. They don't biodegrade. So we just keep building these mountains of waste, and that's normal. We don't have much of a choice in our society. It's a consumer society. We gotta eat. You gotta go to the grocery store to get your food, because no one's gonna grow all their own. We have to have farming. The whole idea that you can have your garden spot and take care of all your needs is not true. Maybe there are some people that do it, but not when you have kids, I promise you that. So, and then we can talk about composting naturally. That's a big one here. I compost everything organic. If you do it properly, I'm sure many of you, I would hope, are composting. Why would you not? Why would you take, just your table scraps? You're preparing your food. You have all this organic matter. If you're like us, we use mostly whole foods in our diet, and we feed our children. We try to be as healthy as possible, so we use a lot of whole foods. That generates a lot of organic biomass in the kitchen of just preparing food that you don't eat. Compost it. You can compost dryer lint, you can compost paper, if it's organic, it can be composted. Naturally, you don't want to do meat, you don't want to do oils because it can attract pests, but composting is, if you're not doing it, you really, really should be doing it because it helps eliminate a lot in our waste stream and it creates black gold that you can then use to grow more of whatever it is you're growing. Instead of going to Lowe's or wherever and buying a bag of it.